Good evening, everyone. You're listening to RedPill78. I am the corruption detector, and this is your Red Pill news. Finally, so sorry about that. Somebody obviously doesn't want this information to get out because my internet was cut as soon as I was about to hit stream. It's been going all night, nice and strong, not a problem. Zen Garcia is with us tonight, author, researcher, radio show host, very prolific writer, Zen Garcia. Zen Garcia is going to be here talking about a lot of things, but primarily, big shout out to Benschwagel, we're going to be talking about the serpent seed. We are going to get into all of this and more, you guys, and we'll be right back after a quick word from my sponsor. Thank you so much, Noble Gold, for sponsoring this program. Is anyone out there stuck on a gift for the holidays? Well, here's your answer. This is the perfect gift for the patriot in your life. The President Trump Commander-in-Chief Solid Silver Coin. It's handcrafted in America for true Americans, and what a time to buy. Until December, Noble Gold are offering this incredible coin with a cool $10 off and a fantastic collector's display case, making an insane $17.95 saving on the price you'd normally pay. Go to TrumpCoin2020.com and select the Commander-in-Chief coin and make sure to use the code RedPill7810 for this unbelievable discounted price. Whether it's for Veterans Day, Thanksgiving, or even Christmas. Don't miss this one. Hit the link or go to TrumpCoin2020.com and choose the Commander-in-Chief coin. And make sure to use the code RedPill7810 for this special discount. All right, guys. Thank you so much for sticking around. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I am just waiting on our guest, Zen Garcia, to get in here on the new Zoom meeting. That link has been sent. Zen, if you are listening, go ahead and refresh your email, and hopefully he'll be here in just a second, you guys. But while we're waiting for Zen to get here, did everybody have a good Thanksgiving? I know that I sure did. Spent it with lots of wonderful people. And let's see here. I want to go ahead and say hello to some people. Let us make the chat box a little bit bigger. How do I do that here? There we go. There we go. Make it a little bit bigger. All right. So we've got people from Lakewood, Colorado, Malta, Illinois, Ohio, Oklahoma, Costa Rica. That's awesome. Costa Rica, Washington State. No, it's people in a turkey coma. Gobble gobble from Texas, Shreveport, Los Angeles, Maryland. Blue Skies joining us for the first time live. Glad to see you, Blue Skies. Texas, Georgia, Castle, Michigan, Kentucky, Tennessee. Listen, guys, before we get into everything with our guest, Zen Garcia, I had some people asking if I knew what happened to Thomas, that Thomas was missing. Well, I gave a call to Thomas, and I found that he's on his way to be with his family. I guess that his father is in some type of a medical emergency, and that's why he was unable to make the show tonight with Linda, and it's why he was unable to let anybody know, because it was an extreme emergency. He just had to leave as soon as he got the call. So everyone, please do pray for Thomas, pray for his family, pray for his father, keep him and everyone else in your hearts and in your prayers. I'm going to go ahead and just see if I can get a hold of Zen here one more time, because we were all set to go and the plug got pulled. Let's see. Here he is. It's asking for a password. Why is it asking for a password? There should be no password. Let's see. Why is it doing that? Let me see, guys. Copy the invitation. Should not be asking for a password. That is very strange. Let's try with that. All right, guys. So we should have Zen here any moment. But like I said, I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving, spent it with my loved ones, and we're going into a big year here, you guys. 2020 is going to be huge. There is so much stuff taking place in the news, so many disclosures that are happening, So many people waking up across the board. It's almost unfathomable the degree with which people are waking up. I saw something today about the number of Democrats that are now switching over to the Republican Party because they believe in what Donald Trump is doing. And people are leaving the Democratic Party because they can see through the facade. And it looks like my guest, Zen Garcia, is here with us now. Zen, are you there?
I am, brother. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thank you so much. I appreciate your patience here with these technical difficulties. Pretty unusual. Everything just got shut down at 9:59 as soon as I was about to go hit stream.
Yeah, pretty crazy. But glad it's all resolved and we're moving forward.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Zen, how was your Thanksgiving?
Pretty excellent. Always a pleasure to be with family and friends and to share meal. And my family's pretty godly. And so, be able to share all the revelations and the things that I teach and broadcast is interesting aspect of what we're able to talk about and share dialogue over. So that's very cool. How about
Beautiful.
yourself?
Yeah, yeah, it was great. I was with my girlfriend and her family. My daughter went with her grandmother. Pardon me. My mom has a special diet, so she didn't eat with anybody. She told everyone to go and go eat where they could eat. But so yeah, it was great. I mean, it was one of the best Thanksgivings in recent memory, and I can't think of another place that I would rather be right now in
Right.
this moment in time. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is Thanksgiving is probably the only kind of traditional holiday that myself and my children celebrate. We don't do a lot of the pagan
Yes.
festivals and things of that nature, but Thanksgiving is always a pleasure and to show gratitude to the Most High for all the bounty and blessing and abundance that He pours forth upon us as well. I just really like the ideology and the concept behind the gathering of Thanksgiving and even the name. Just the gratitude to the creators, something that is really close to my heart.
Oh, absolutely. I can totally agree with you there. Well, Zen, I gave a little bit of an introduction to you while we were waiting for you to join the call. But you are an author, you're a researcher, you are a radio show host yourself. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you've been doing this whole time?
Sure. I've been an author since 1992. I published my first book when I was 22 years old and have since then published, authored 24 um, of my personal uh, manuscripts, and then have also compiled numerous um, compilations of ancient manuscripts and have released those as well. Myself and my children, we run a publishing company called Sacred Word Publishing, and uh, and for those that might be interested in the manuscripts that we do release, you can actually find a 35% discount on those titles that we do have available at our website until the end of this month. And so go there. And I'll also make mention that we are hosting a conference in March upcoming of this year, and the early bird tickets run out as well. The discount ends at the end of this month. Myself, Rob Skiba, Gary Wayne, Dr. Joy Jeffries Pugh, Yana and Stephen Benoon of Israeli News Live, my son Justin James Garcia, Laurel Austin, and Dr. Stephen Pigeon will all be speaking there at that conference. But I'm also a radio show host as well, like yourself. I do one show on Wednesday evening, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on Revolution Radio. It's called Momentary Zen. And then on Thursday night, I'm on Truth Frequency Radio, 9 to 11 p.m. every Thursday. And that show is called Secrets Revealed. And then we do a digital book readers club every Saturday where we go through some of the books that we've released, some of the ancient manuscripts, and we do that with a worldwide audience, and basically like an ecclesia gathering of truth seekers, and it's a blessing as well, and that's from 7 to 8:30 p.m. on every Saturday, and then every other Friday I do an Ask Me Anything show with my daughter-in-law, Joy, and that is hosted on our YouTube channels, Endeavor Freedom and Zen Garcia. So you can find most of my work there. And if people are interested in also the guest appearances that I make, I do release that information on our Facebook page. And that is just Zen Garcia.
Excellent. What a blessing for you to be able to work with your family. That's
Yes,
an
it is.
enviable position for a lot of people, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I'm fortunate and very blessed that my children are awakened at such a young age, and that they are also deeply involved in the work that I do to bring forth truth, and not only to connect the ancient mysteries with the biblical prophetic side of what's going on in the world, but also to unite that in theme with the New World Order, and some of the things which we'll be talking about tonight with regard to the bloodlines and how it connects to what occurred in the garden.
And that right there, the serpent seed, that is what drew me to you. Our mutual friend, I don't know if you know Ben Schwagel, but he's someone who follows your work quite extensively. And for a long time, he was messaging me and saying that I should get in touch with you. And once I started looking into everything that you've done, I mean, you have quite the catalog of research that you've gotten into. I knew that this was going to be an incredible show, and I could not wait to get a hold of you. Now,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm really glad that you did. And I do believe that this particular theme that we'll be speaking on this evening is a skeleton key for uniting all of these various concepts, as I made mention, the ancient mysteries, the biblical and prophetic side, and the conspiratorial New World Order side of what we are contending with, even in this day and age, because all of the seed of Cain, as is commented on and regarded in Scripture, they are the principles that are sitting upon the thrones of the world today, that use the divine right to rule and have. They are the same bloodline connected to Queen Elizabeth, and they're all the same bloodlines. Even the presidents here in the United States, that when you really do your research, you'll discover that 44 out of the many presidents that we've had are all blood related and from the same family. And so this is the connection which will help bring to light this hidden theme. And it also explains why it is that even in this day and age, we see that the prevalence and the propagation of evil is ongoing and widespread, unless one understands that there truly is a bloodline related to the devil here upon the earth, and that they have from the shadows been ruling over and controlling the fate and the destiny of humanity. It just does not make sense as to how we are not able to evolve to a degree where we can put all these negative aspects of human nature behind us.
It's interesting. I mean, you had mentioned the how this is kind of the common thread that runs through everything, and I often say, this is more than just a modern day war. I mean, we're talking about quite literally thousands of years, if not more, of this cabal and these bloodlines ruling over us here on the face of the planet. What was it that drew you to this research and allowed you to kind of discover this and bring it to the forefront?
Well, I had been involved with and studying and looking into New Age theologies for a very long time, and I'd studied all of the Sumerian mythologies with regard to the Anunnaki and these seraphic angels and how they ruled in the antediluvian age. And then I was interested and wanted to read and study and to examine a lot of the extra biblical texts which were coming to light. And ever since we had access to the internet, a lot of that research has been available to us just by, searching at a keystroke, whatever ancient manuscripts, whatever ancient text you might have interest in. And so examining all of what has been hidden, forgotten, and forbidden to us for thousands of years has become so easily accessible that really there's no excuse for anybody to remain in ignorance. And so I wanted to study and read from everything. And in doing so, I found quickly that many concepts that kept presenting themselves to me in the study of these ancient texts, that they were not spoken about and not brought out in any manner by mainstream Christianity or even among, the alternative truth communities. And so I began to write these different books on different themes. And my fourth book became the first in the line of those that I released on, biblical concepts. And that one was called Lucifer, Father of Cain. And then I wrote Awaken to the New World Order. My sixth book was Sons of God, Who We Are and Why We're Here. My seventh was Skyfall, The Angels of Destiny. The eighth was um, the Aramaic and Palestinian Targum, which is the oldest translation of the Hebrew Torah into a different language. And we now have English translations of that very ancient, um, what's called a Targum. It just means translation in Aramaic. And reading and studying from this particular um, this ancient text, it also revealed to me a lot, especially with serpent seed. You can find, without a doubt, knowledge and revelation of this within that ancient manuscript. And so it was a confirming witness to the work that I had done previously. And then, of course, I got into um, as far as flat earth biblical cosmology. I wrote Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, The Firmament Vaulted Dome of the Earth, and Paradise Sides of the North and Mount of the Congregation, and then so many others as well since that time. But again, there were these themes like the serpent seed, pre existence, and things like that that were not spoken about, were not covered, and not examined in any manner. The sons of God, the Genesis 6 interdiction of the angels with the daughters of Cain, the creation of a race of giants, these particular hybrid bloodlines that are also here and present and have been on the earth, and the enemies of humanity, uh, going all the way back again to the garden. And so the two books that for those that are new to my work, I um, always reiterate to individuals to, if you're interested in my work, to look at what I wrote as the Great Contest, and they were my 12th and 14th books. The Great Contest 1 is called The War in Heaven, and the second, The Great Contest 2, The Enmity Between the Seed Lines. And these two books bring and connect the bigger picture of everything and ties it to what was the original war in heaven, because that goes back to the very beginning and the division of light and darkness, as well as the angels that rebelled against the Most High and that became the powers, the principalities, the rulers of darkness and wickedness in high places. They are the eye at the top of the Illuminati pyramid that, being disjointed from the rest of the body, they are the spiritual forces of darkness which rule over the serpent bloodlines that are also in blood oath aligned against us as the children of Adam. And so, again, those are the things that we'll get into this evening. But as you said, very ancient war, going all the way back even to the times of Atlantis and even before then, in my opinion.
And how did you actually come to the original concept of the serpent seed. Was this something that you uncovered in the course of, the translation of these ancient texts that you were looking at, or was it? Did someone else clue you into it?
No, it came from reading the Bible with fresh eyes
Okay.
and without having somebody interpret to me and to teach me what it was supposed to mean. And what I'm specifically relating is the fall of humanity that is listed in Genesis chapter 3. Because in that story, you see that Eve is tempted by the serpent to eat from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, the consequences of her and Adam having eaten of this fruit and the serpent having tempted them to eat of this fruit is that right off after eating this fruit, you see that they then cover their genitals with fig leaves and then they hide themselves away from the Most High God. And then he calls them forth from their hiding places and then brings forth these punishments against them. He says to the serpent in Genesis 3:15 that he would put enmity between thy seed, meaning the serpent, and her seed, meaning the woman's. And so the result of their eating the fruit of this tree of the knowledge of good and evil was that there would be two bloodlines born as a consequence of their actions. And so I realized immediately that this fruit had sexual connotations associated to it that nobody was speaking about, and that the only way that you could truly metaphorically interpret what had happened in the garden was by understanding that the beguilement of Eve and looking at the Hebrew of that particular word, nasha in the Hebrew, it means wholly, completely, and utterly seduced.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's also a verse in Second Corinthians chapter 11 verses 2 and 3, where Paul references Eve's beguilement, that is the reason she lost her chastity and was no longer a virgin. And so that also was confirmation as to that the story has to be interpreted in a manner that a sexual liaison occurred. And so when you re-examine, as I was stating, and we can go into greater detail on this, but when you look at the punishments that were brought forth from the Most High God upon the serpent, Eve, and Adam, you see that Eve, the punishment that was brought to bear upon her was that she would bring forth children in sorrow. And Adam, he would have to work the ground in order to bring forth sustenance to feed what would be his future progeny. And so if you believe that Eve just ate a fruit, a piece of fruit, an apple or a pomegranate or a fig, whatever it is you decide to, convey that particular fruit, the result of it were carnal in nature. And so the only way to really fully understand that story and to bring forth what is conveyed in scripture in the early chapters with regard to the fall of humanity is by understanding again that this sexual liaison occurred, and that what essentially happened was that the serpent beguiling Eve impregnated her with Cain, who was the firstborn son of the devil, and is described so in the scriptures. In First John chapter 3, verse 12, it says of Cain that he is of the wicked one. And then we see in Matthew chapter 13 that Christ goes into great detail in parable all throughout that particular chapter, in the parable of the sower, the parable of the kingdom, the parable of the tares of the field. He describes an enemy sneaking into the garden and sowing the tares. And the angels ask him, do you want us to gather the tares, uproot them, But he says, nay, because if you do so, you'll uproot the wheat as well. He says, let both grow together until the time of the end. And in the time of the end, he'll send forth his angels as reapers to gather the tares for burning, but the wheat for preservation. And then he explains that the children of the kingdom are the good seed, and that the tares, are the children of the enemy. The enemy, which again is referenced as being the father of Cain, who was of the wicked one. And then he very precisely tells us that the tares are the children of the devil. And so, you know, and for whatever reason, and I don't understand this even unto this day, but this particular knowledge is vehemently opposed and greatly condemned. And, I don't really even understand as to why, because in my opinion, it's just, it's an interpretation which brings forth the truth of what is revealed in scripture. But even if you choose not to believe, or you choose to believe this, I just don't understand why people are so highly critical of it. So much so that, they call me a heretic or a blasphemer or whatever. So
I was just going to comment on that. I mean, in the lead up to this show, there was a lot of people who seemed to be very, very divided by this, the very idea that this could be. And I mean, I guess I've always thought that, the Bible is the word of God written by man, and men are certainly fallible, and it's definitely been controlled throughout the ages by whoever was in power at that time, whoever was the Pope, whoever is leading the church at this given moment. But so it doesn't seem too out of this world to me that something like this could be hidden, especially when we're talking about probably the most wicked people that I can imagine, who are comprising the cabal.
yeah, absolutely. And knowledge has always been controlled from top down. If you look historically at, the different councils that have come together, and the different, as far as the supposed vicars of the Most High God through the Roman Catholic Church, that they have, through Inquisition, burned at the stake everybody that has been in any manner opposed to their particular slant on theology. And they are the ones that said that, only this amount of books are authorized. Everything else should be condemned, judged, and not even examined. And this historically has been the indoctrination that everybody has been brought up, and with this perspective, they don't even understand why they are opposed to some of these extra biblical materials. And so, yes, even those that translated, the Bible into English or into German or into different languages, they were hunted down and burned at the stake for even making accessible the revelations that are contained within the gospel to the laypersons, the masses. And nobody really questions as to why these supposed, and I do believe that it was the seed of Cain that was conducting these kind of massacres and these kind of inquisitions against the people that were trying to reveal truth for thousands of years. And it's still this way. Even with the access of the internet, you still see this kind of mindset, um, and this kind of indoctrination. Uh, this is the perspective which most people have, and they don't really even understand why.
Real quick, Zen, I need to go do a couple of quick thank yous to the audience. Ben Schwagel just showed up. He says, sorry I'm late. Glad you're here, though, Ben Schwagel. Michael Kenny said, let's all show Thomas our strong support for him in his comments. Press 17 for him and his dad. Thanks for that. Jammer drops a hammer, says, Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. And Logan Johnson says, when life gives you lemons, make sure that you throw them at random people for good luck and run away like HE double hockey sticks. Anyway, keep up the good work. Well, thank you for that. And then Dana Finkler, what's up, brother, says, keep up the good work, buddy. And then we got Ben Schmogel there. So
yeah, appreciate you, Ben.
Yeah, definitely.
And prayers for your friend as well.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Now, during the course of your research, were you able to find any evidence that this specific teaching had been suppressed, or that there was, any time in history when people, tried to talk about this and they were shut down?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, what I came to understand is that the knowledge that I am bringing forth and sharing in the revelation of my books, that this was common knowledge, that this was what everybody understood during the early times of the establishment of what became the church and the ecclesia. And that certainly this knowledge has been suppressed, and that I believe that much of the reason for targeting certain manuscripts was that the children of Cain were trying to hide their existence here upon the earth, and to also hide their connections to the devil and how they have utilized for millennia the divine right to rule as their the reasons for them to rule in impunity and to orchestrate the new world order, because they do believe themselves to be the chosen, and not necessarily the chosen of God, but the chosen of the devil. And so unless one understands these concepts, really you can't make sense of why it is, again, that we see evil propagated and ruling over even this day and age. And so, yes, I had made mention of the Aramaic Targum, which is the oldest translation of the Hebrew Torah into a different language. It dates back to 500 BC, and it came about because of the diaspora of the Israelites when they were exiled under in Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar, when he destroyed the temple in 587 BC and then took all the Israelites and exiled them to Babylon. This is when the Israelites themselves assimilated Aramaic as their predominant lexicon. Prior to that, they all spoke Hebrew. And so during the 70 years of this diaspora, they all assimilated Aramaic because that was the dominant language there in the Middle East. And it was the language which all the people made barter and trade. And so when Cyrus and Darius took over, and we see that in the vision of Daniel, that this was the second kingdom, the Medo-Persian kingdom that came to power, they allowed the Israelites to return back to the Holy Land and to reconstruct the temple. And they did so. And when they began to reinstitute worship, the rabbis and the elders, they realized that they had to stop devotion and keep translating what the Hebrew Torah into the Aramaic, so that the common people could follow along and understand. And so this particular translation was authorized, and the Aramaic Targum is the oldest and the most well recognized and well known translation. Again, Targum meaning translation in the Aramaic. And this was a text that only came to light in 1862. J.W. Etheridge, he translated into English, and it came to light again to public consideration. And now that we have that English translation, we can examine and read what essentially is the first translation and the oldest translation. This one even predates the Greek Septuagint by 200 years, and all modern English translations is 2,000 years older than the King James. And so when you read um, the some of the verses in there, you realize that there's much more detail in the Aramaic Targum available almost on every chapter and every verse.
I, I,
And
I really want to talk specifically about that extra detail and those differences because one of the big things that people say is that that story of Adam and Eve and the apple, it's an allegory for knowledge. How do we know that it actually is an allegory for the bloodline itself?
yes, very good question. And so, yeah, let me share with you a few passages just to give you an idea of the variation that you can find in the King James and also that of this Aramaic translation. And so, looking at Genesis 3:15, where we see the verse where, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed, it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. In the Aramaic Targum, it says, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between the seed of thy son and the seed of her sons. And the reason it says the seed of her sons is because we know, and this is specific again to Cain and Abel, we know that Cain is the serpent's son. And that's why it says here, the seed of thy son, speaking to the serpent, and the seed of her sons. And the reason it has plural with regard to Eve's sons is because Cain killed his half brother Abel, and Seth was born 130 years later as a replacement for Abel. And when you look at even in the King James version of the Bible, you'll see that the first 10 generations of Cain are set apart from Adam's genealogy, and they are found listed in Genesis chapter 4, whereas Adam's bloodline is listed in Genesis chapter 5. And so this particular passage in the Targum is specific to that the children that would be these two bloodlines, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, they are specific to Cain and Abel. And that what God said as the punishments, where he said to Eve in Genesis 3:16, that thou shalt bear children in sorrow, and that she would be the mother of all the living. This was because Eve is the mother of both the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And so these are the two bloodlines. But Adam is only the father of Abel and Seth. And that we see in the Bible, it says that both were born in his likeness and in his similitude. And we get clarity on that as we go further. Like, for instance, I'll read a passage here in the book of Jubilees. It says, and Adam and his wife mourned for Abel 4 weeks of years. And in the fourth year, the fifth week, they became joyful. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare him a son, and he called his name Seth, for he said, God hath raised up a second seed unto us on the earth instead of Abel, for Cain slew him. And so, if Cain were Adam's child, he would be the third son. But we see specifically that Seth is the second son because Adam was not Cain's father. And we see in the medical terminology that this is referenced two sons born of different fathers. It's called heteropaternal superfecundation. And it simply means that when a woman has sexual relations with two men, that she can oftentimes bear fraternal twins from birth both of these different fathers. And that's exactly what we see being and occurring in Genesis with the story of the fall of humanity. And this is also why it is that Cain is a murderer, a liar, and a deceiver. And he is unlike Adam and Eve. And it's even said of Cain in the ancient manuscripts, which I'll get to here in a short bit, that he had a seraphic appearance, much like the seraphim angels. And that word Sarah means serpent like or reptilian, which is interesting because it is said of the elites today that their bloodlines are what Christ refers to in the scriptures as a brood of vipers
Hmm.
or a den of vipers. And we see that the serpent, again, beguiling Eve, that it would make sense that the firstborn son would have this seraphic appearance. And so, the serpent is said to be in Revelation 12, that old dragon, that ancient serpent who deceiveth the entirety of the world. And so these kind of things are also brought forth. But the big one, which a lot of people uh, believe that, the in Genesis 4:1, it says, and Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. That is telling us without a doubt that Cain is Adam and Eve's son. But that is actually not true, and I'll explain why. You see, first in the King James, and Adam knew Eve his wife, there's a semicolon after that passage. And a semicolon denotes separation. And so that verse is actually distinct and separated from the verse, and she conceived and bare Cain. And I'll explain why. Because in the Targum, that verse, and there's a passage that is excluded from the English translation, it actually references this. And Adam knew Hava, which means life giver. That's the name in the Hebrew, what we translate to Eve. And Adam knew Hava, his wife, who had desired the angel, semicolon. And she conceived and bare Cain, semicolon. And she said, I have acquired a man from the angel of the Lord. And then she added to bear from her husband, Adam, his twin, Abel. And so we see that in the King James, you have this verse, who had desired the angel, missing. It's been excluded,
Hmm.
extirpated from that particular passage. And the reason why, again, in my opinion, is because it shows to us that it was her desire for this angel that truly led to the conception of Cain. And that's why it's strange that in the King James it says, and she said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And so everybody just thinks that, that God had given her a child, and that's what it actually is referencing to. But when you read the fullness of the Targum passage, it says, who had desired the angel, she conceived and bare Cain. And she said, I have acquired a man from the angel of the Lord, which is exactly what happened. It was her beguilement by the angel Samael, which just means the angel of death, the viper of God. Satan is a title, it means adversary. And so that's what he became after he caused the fall of humanity, and he was cast down to the heavens. But um and so her saying that I haven't acquired a man from the angel of the Lord is exactly what happened. And when you understand it that way, it makes better sense. You had a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say that that's absolutely fascinating. I mean, knowing that that was taken out, that does provide a bit of unique context in terms of this particular theory. Real quick, we needed to say a couple of quick thank yous. This is a good comment from Russ. Russ Bergeron says, what about Noah and the flood? Everyone died but Noah and his family. No seed of Cain left.
That's not actually true. And I do explain in the enmity between the seed lines in that book in the 19th chapter how the seed of Cain survived the flood. And it occurred through um, Ham, who was not born of the same mother as Shem and Japheth. And Ham, in the story in the Bible, it says that Ham saw the nakedness of his father. And when you understand, you read in Leviticus 18:8 that means that he actually had sexual relations with Noah's wife. That seeing the nakedness of the father actually means that he had, again, sexual relations with Noah's wife. That it describes, and I explained that Nama, the sister of Tubal Cain, listed in Genesis chapter 4, who was the daughter of Lamech of the seed of Cain, Noah was instructed to take her as his second wife, and that it would be through her that the seed of Cain would be given continuance through the flood. Because again, it goes back to um, the Matthew chapter 13, where Christ said, "Let both grow together until the time of the end." And in the end, he would send the angels as reapers to gather the tares for burning and the wheat for preservation. So they would have continuance until the end of days. And when Yeshua comes again in second advent, that's when the harvest will ensue. And that's when the actual separation of the wheat and the tares will take place.
All right. Crypto Angel says, "Thank God we all think differently. We all have our own dreams. I love you guys for sharing your beliefs, and thank you for that, Crypto Angels. I appreciate that." And one of the things that is striking to me is that the the wholesale rejection of information that is outside of a person's given paradigm. Everything that they know can be challenged in so many different ways, except for maybe like one or two ways. People get really uncomfortable with the idea that they've been lied to about certain things. So whether or not you believe the information that Zen is putting forward, you have to admit that it does explain some things that maybe didn't make sense before. AZ Finn says, "Zen, any thoughts on the Rh negative or positive blood? Do you think that this ties into it?"
Great question. And yes, in my opinion, the Rh negative is indicative of this particular involvement of the fallen angels with these particular bloodlines. And you'll see that the these particular bloodlines also strategically intermarry amongst themselves and often will take cousins, even half sisters, um, to be their wives, so as to, to kind of concentrate this blood and this genealogy. Um, and you find them always that they will intermarry amongst their bloodlines, even though we know that to be something that leads to schizophrenia or to some kind of
Birth
schizoid,
defects.
yeah, to birth defects, genetic defects. And yet they practice this as strategy in order to concentrate what I believe to be psychical powers.
Hmm.
And also that they have a greater tendency to be able to conjure up devils and demons and to involve themselves with these particular forces and entities. And that we also see that the alien abduction phenomena is carried out generationally in these particular bloodlines as well.
Wow. Aaron Moffat's here. Aaron says, "I know the Lord
Hey, Aaron.
blesses your work, Zen, and we must continue to teach the truth. I'm inspired by you and glad we support each other in this community. Can't wait to catch up soon."
Yes, absolutely. And, I really appreciate Erin and her open mindedness. And with regard to information and truth, it's only when one has an open mind and entertains new possibility that we can learn things that are contrary to the indoctrination that we have been brought up in. And with regard to so much, especially, now that I understand the biblical cosmology, I realize just how much deception we've all been indoctrinated into and how much we have yet to learn of truth. And so we really have to open ourselves to new possibility and examine things with, as a criminal, lawyer, and also as a criminal investigator would do so. They turn over every leaf in order to see whether a piece of evidence actually ties into the investigation that they are putting forth. And nothing is, without regard. They examine everything. And so when you look at the fullness of not only, the Targum, I make mention, there's so many, literally in my books, each one of them, there are hundreds of sources from various ancient manuscripts which all confirm this. And
Really?
so, without a doubt, if you understand this that I'm teaching, the Bible will open up to you in a way that it never had previously, and that you will be able to understand it, even as to why the patriarchs and the prophets wrote in such great detail as to who begot who and who was the son of who. None of that makes very much sense, and it's things that we largely glean over and without even really paying attention to. But when you understand that the Bible is actually keeping track of in great detail of two particular bloodlines, and the war, the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent as it plays out throughout all history, then it makes sense as to why, they exhausted themselves in keeping such record.
Yeah, if it's all about keeping track of those bloodlines, that does make a lot of sense. I mean, I guess I always just thought that it was the first, I guess, like Ancestry.com, like the first recorded names of the people as they were, being raised and having children. But if you're thinking about it as a means to keep track of them, that does make a lot of sense. TikTok just said, does this have a lot to do with the Dead Sea Scrolls and why the Catholic Church won't let some of the books be released? This is what I hear: is there are books that they won't let the public people see in the public. And this is actually, this is a great time to bring that up because I wanted to ask you about that. How does this specifically relate to any of the Dead Sea Scrolls that you know of? And how many manuscripts have you uncovered or translated that have been covered up or are not official doctrine?
There are literally, and yes, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi Codices, books that are coming forth even now, like the Thracian Chronicles. I've literally found evidence of this in all of the different ancient manuscripts. And understanding, again, as I said, once you have the skeleton key, you can better understand what is even evident and encoded within the King James Version of the Bible and all other manuscripts, because this knowledge is still conveyed there. It's just little understood. And because it's not part of mainstream teaching, it's an area that remains ambiguous and, not self evident. But again, when you read and study all of the different ancient manuscripts, as I have, because what I've done is I've gone back and examined all of these different apocryphal texts, and you find mention in every body of work: the Apocrypha, the Pseudepigrapha, the New Testament Apocrypha. There's literally um, links and scriptures connected in every manner to this particular teaching, which, again, you have to exclude this entire body of work in order to hold on to your narrow minded view. And so, again, it becomes very self evident. And I'll share just a few more um, things to give you better understanding from the Legends of the Jews, which was published in 1700 by a Johann Eisenmenger. And it's interesting that when he released his book, that the emperor that was sitting on one of the thrones of, the Catholic papacy, he ordered that all of these books be gathered up and burned. And it was only 40 years later that one of the manuscripts came to light and was published and made available to us. And it was specific again about the seed of the serpent. And the traditions of the Jews and Louis Ginsburg in his work, it also makes reference. But I'll share what they say of Genesis 4:1, which again is the verse that so many people believe, where it says, "And Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain." In the Targum, it says, "And Adam knew Hava his wife, who had desired the angel, and she conceived, bare Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the angel of the Lord." It says in the legends of the Jews, "And Adam knew his wife, who had conceived by the angel Samael, was pregnant and bare Cain, whose resemblance was like the upper creatures and not like the lower. And she said, I have gotten the man from the angel of the Lord." Which again is, when you understand that Cain truly was a child from the devil, the wicked one, who was, one of these angels of the Lord, then those verses actually make sense. In the traditions of the Jews, it says Cain's descent from Satan, who is the angel Samael, was revealed in his seraphic appearance. At his birth, the exclamation was wrung from me, I have gotten a man through the angel of the Lord. In Genesis chapter 5, which again, I said that this was the chapter where you see that the children of Adam are listed in 10 generations there in Genesis chapter 5, whereas the children of Cain are separated in his from his genealogical record, and they are found listed in Genesis chapter 4. It says this of the the genealogy of Adam. "And Adam lived 130 years and begat Sheth, who had the likeness of his image and his similitude." Also, Sheth in Hebrew means compensation, substitution, and replacement, whereas Cain, the name of Cain, it means acquired and possession, and which in my mind is exactly what Cain was. He was Adam's stepson. He was acquired as a possession because he was not his son
Mm.
and he was not born in his likeness. And so, continuing, "And Adam lived 130 years and begat Sheth, who had the likeness of his image and of his similitude. For before had Hava borne Cain, who was not like him, and Abel was killed by his hand. And Cain was cast out, neither is his seed genealized in the book of the genealogy of Adam. But afterwards there was one born like him, and he called his name Sheth." And so one can find confirmation that Cain is not part of Adam's genealogy in two different places. In Luke chapter 3, verses 30 through 38, you see there that the genealogy of Christ, who would be in the second part of Genesis 3:15, the prophecy of him crushing the head of the serpent as the serpent was nipping at his heel, this was fulfilled by Christ. And in Luke chapter 3, you see that Cain is excluded from his genealogy. And so, how this was actually fulfilled was that when Christ was crucified on the cross as the seed of the woman, 1600 years earlier, David, when he had killed Goliath, who was without a doubt Nephilim, a giant, a Philistine champion who was mocking the Israelites and making fun of their God and also tempting Saul, their king, to come out and to fight him and to challenge him. And yet David went out and used a sling stone to to stun Goliath, and then ran up to him, used his own sword to cut off his head. He took his head back to Jerusalem to show to the people that indeed he had slaughtered their champion and freed them from the bondage of the Philistines. And so afterwards, he buried Goliath's skull at a place called Golgotha, which, in looking at the the what that means. It means Goliath of Gath, which is where Goliath was from, the Philistine, the place there where the Palestinians live. That is where Gath was. And so, burying his head there at a place called Calvary, Golgotha, when Christ again was crucified on the cross, he was actually crushing the head of the serpent, Goliath's skull, at the same time that it was nipping at his heel. And so, this prophecy in Genesis 3:15 that was given to the serpent and to Adam and Eve was actually fulfilled when the Son of God came into and entered into flesh form and dying on the cross, redeemed Adam and his descendants. He descended down into Sheol, freed them from the bondage, and returned them as the resurrected first fruits to paradise. And they were baptized in the Arturian lake by the archangel Michael, as is revealed in the Gospel of Nicodemus, and then they were allowed to enter into New Jerusalem, the city of paradise, where they await us even now. There's a couple of verses, also in Jude chapter 1, you see that it speaks of Enoch as being the seventh from Adam. If you include Cain as the firstborn son of Adam, then Enoch would be the eighth from Adam and not the seventh. And so, there's two confirming witnesses as to Cain not being of the bloodline of Adam or Yahushua. And so we see in the Keber Nagas, it says this of Cain: and he drove him out of the garden because of his apostasy through the sin of the serpent and the plotting of the devil. And at that sorrowful moment, Cain was born. And when Adam saw that the face of Cain was ill tempered or sullen and his appearance evil, he was sad. And Abel was born. And when Adam saw that his appearance was good and his face good tempered, he said, "This is my son, the heir of my kingdom." And so, again, we see without a doubt that Cain was said to have a seraphic appearance, which the seraphim angels are snake like. That word Sarah
Mm-hmm.
means serpent or reptilian. And Pheme is just a plural. And so, the seraphim angels being serpent like, dragon like entities, which is exactly what we see in the depictions of the Anunnaki, that they are these feathered serpent, these reptilian beings.
Mm.
And so, exactly the allusion to the reptilian and the connection of the bloodline of Cain is something that is with us even today.
Continues through. Now, Michael Buck asks, what does Zen think about the Sepher translation? Cepher?
Yeah, I think the Sepher translation is a really good translation in that it covers and restores the name of God to, Yod Vadhe, which is the Tetragrammaton, and also the name of Yahushua, which means Yah's salvation. And actually, that the names of God point to the Father and to the Son. Because in the ancient Hebrew pictographic language, the Yod He Vod He actually means behold the hand, behold the nail, which we know that Yahushua being crucified, that the nails were plunged through, I believe, his wrists. But, again, it's connected to the crucifixion of the Son. And so the Father's name points to Yahushua Christ, whereas his name in the Hebrew, which is Joshua in the English, Yahushua means Yah's salvation or Yahweh's salvation, which is exactly what he was when he came into the flesh. He was our salvation. He was the lamb which brought forgiveness of the sins of humanity.
Absolutely. All right. And Michael Kenny says YouTube is full of in-depth breakdowns like this. Sadly, it's about Marvel and Star Wars, not the stuff that is real and matters like this. Kudos. Well, thank you for that, Michael. And Zen, again, thank you for being here to talk about this. What do you think about taking some calls now, Zen? Are you
Yeah, let me bring up one last passage
Please.
because this one is also, again, like you were asking me about different collections of manuscripts and how they are connected to this knowledge. Well, this particular passage from the Gospel of Philip was found at the with the Nag Hammadi codices back in 1945 in that Nag Hammadi Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
and it also contains knowledge of this. And without a doubt, the only way that one can uh, to really understand and interpret this passage is by having this knowledge. And I'll explain it. It says this: He who has been created is beautiful, but you would not find his son's noble creations. If he were not created but begotten, you would find that his seed was noble. But now he was created and he begot. What nobility is this? And so let me explain this portion of the passage before going into the next.
Okay.
This passage is actually speaking about Lucifer because he was a created angel. Satan, the adversary, Samael, the angel of death. Because he was created and not born of woman, he was not supposed to have children. As we see in that verse in Matthew 23, where, Christ says that the angels are not given in marriage. And that was actually a reference to Enoch chapter 15, where it speaks about how the angels were, never to be, they were not supposed to procreate or to have spouses because they're immortal, they're spiritual beings. Whereas humanity, we propagate through having spouses and coming together in couples, and that through making love, we propagate the bloodline and we propagate the seed and we have children, which continues the human race. And so this verse, he who has been created, again, is speaking of Samael, Lucifer, the angel of death, but you would not find his son's noble creation. The reason is because he was never supposed to have sons. And so that's why his sons would not be noble creation. If he were not created, meaning if he were not an angel, but begotten, then you would find that his seed was noble, meaning that his children that were born of him would be normal human children, and not, a hybrid race that wasn't ever supposed to come into being. But now he was created, meaning he was angelic, and he begot. What nobility is this? And so this passage is telling you, as far as Satan, and that he was not supposed to have children. And then it says this: first, adultery came into being, afterwards, murder. And what was that adultery? It was his beguilement of Eve.
Yeah.
And because he adultery first came into being, and then he impregnated her with Cain. When Cain was born, he murdered his half brother Abel. And so then, first adultery came into being, afterward, murder, just
Yeah.
as the passage says. And then it says, and he was begotten in adultery, for he was the child of the serpent. And so he became a murderer, just like his father, and he killed his brother. Indeed, every act of sexual intercourse which has occurred between those unlike one another is adultery. And so, again, it's very clear there that Cain was a child of the serpent. It's undeniable, and that this is why he was evilly inclined. He was a murderer, just like his father, and he killed his brother, as the passage says. You can't explain it any other way.
No, I think that one's. They've been getting more and more clear cut every time you
Yeah.
bring up an
Mhm.
example. Let's see, real quick. My good friend Charles Pixley is here. Charles, thank you for that super chat. He says, "Good stuff, Zen. History, we know, is the fall from perfect knowledge. Thus, all branches of knowledge are founded on fiction. After a father is waking up. We are in the period of revelations. We are waking up together now as the Great Awakening, where we go one, we
Amen.
go all." Thank you,
Yes.
Charles. Glad to see you here, buddy. And then AZ Finn says, "Zen, what are your thoughts on the black-eyed children among us? Nephilim?"
Yeah, I do believe it shows the demonic influence, the demonic possession, and that these beings are unnormal. and they show to us, because it says in this time that we are in that the veils between spirit and matter would become thinner, and that the supernatural would bleed over into our realities.
Yeah.
And I think that the Black Eyed Children are part of that.
I can totally see that. And then thank you for that, 27 Sparkle. Appreciate that. Okay, you guys, I have put the link to this Zoom call into the description below. If you're using Zoom on your phone and you don't want your full name to be shown when you get on the call, then you must have your name listed in Zoom as something else. If you are calling in using the phone number, which is also in the description of the video now, then you also must push *67 in order to not have your phone number display on the screen. Need to set a couple of ground rules. Please, I want everyone who calls in to be asking questions of Zen about this subject, and we do need to make sure that we allow for everyone that wants to call in to be able to call in. So we're going to keep the talk time at 2 minutes. So you've got 2 minutes to ask your question or to make your comment of Zen, and then we'll continue, and Zen will answer the question, and then you can take your answer off the air. And we've already got our first caller. It is Aaron. What's up, my friend? Can you hear us, Aaron? Looks like Aaron's waiting to get his speakers online. But Michael Kenny just said, love to know his opinion on why Satan hates us, not how he acted upon that hate, but why. What caused an angel to invent murder?
A really good question. And you can look to chapters 55 through 57 in the first book of Adam and Eve, and it describes that it was because of Christ taking dominion and being revealed to the angels, the sons of God, that Lucifer became jealous of his seat, because he was the first created archangel. And then when Christ was revealed as the light of the world in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, where God said, "Let there be light," this is when the Son was revealed to the sons of God, and they shouted for joy. And this is also when the creation first became visible. But this is also when iniquity was found in Lucifer, and he had the thought in his heart to exalt his throne above the stars and the clouds of God, and to be like the Most High, as it says in Isaiah chapter 14. You can also find reference to the fall of Lucifer in the second book of Enoch, chapters 29 and 30. And it tells you there that this happened on the second day. And this is what led to the war in heaven, where the earth became destroyed. And so,
And I'm sorry about that. Anybody that is calling in, make sure that when you start to call in, you mute the volume on the stream, because we'll get feedback otherwise. But I'm sorry, continue, Zen.
Yeah, and so that's it was because he was jealous of Christ and could not take um, revenge against him, that he took revenge against Adam when Adam was made, and he caused the Lord's highest creature to fall and to be banished here upon the earth with him. And impregnating Eve, he brought forth his own bloodline, his own children. And so it would be here upon the earth that the war in heaven would continue, and that we would see that the division of light and darkness and the knowledge of good and evil would play out here upon the earth through the bloodlines of both Adam and the serpent.
All right, excellent. Well, Aaron, are you there? Aaron, I've got no audio from you, buddy. Oh, there you go. You're muted. Go ahead and unmute. I can unmute you. No, I guess it's not letting me. Still got no audio.
There we go. All right. Hello?
Hello, we've got you. Aaron, you're on the air with Zen Garcia. How are you, my friend?
If I was doing any better, I'd be you. Zen, great show. Awesome information. I got to ask you, in your researching, have you come across the Talmud of Emmanuel? Discovered by Billy Meyer and a Greek priest, Isa Rashid, in 1963.
No, I have not. But
You gotta look.
I'll check it out. Yeah.
It was written in Aramaic. It was
Oh,
hidden
very
in
interesting.
hillside near Jerusalem, and it was under a rock, wrapped with crumbly resin, goat skin. They were
Wow.
Aramaic scrolls. Isa Rashid was so impressed that he quit the priesthood and devoted his life to translating the transcripts, and he did to German. He sent the first 3 chapters to Billy, and then he was killed, and his whole family was killed, and the Talmud
Wow.
went missing. And so those 3 chapters were the book of Matthew, but with no discrepancies.
Wow, that's amazing.
Could
Well,
you
you
could you
definitely
repeat
piqued
that
my
again, Aaron,
interest.
so that I could do a Google search? And
Matthew. Okay, yeah, you can get it online. It's great. I got the book. It's a great book, and it's really the only book that's really spoken to me. I tried reading the Bible. This thing really, it sounded like it's amazing. So, in the Talmud, he describes that they changed Jesus's Emmanuel's name like 46 years after his death because too many people were following him, and they changed the story a little bit. So the Talmud is like I said, it's been studied by theologists, and it's got no discrepancies, whereas the book of Matthew has discrepancies. Like when they're putting the thorn of crowns on his head, and he's asking who did that. It's because in the Talmud, it explains someone behind him says something. That's why he said that. And he also said that Emmanuel was not the son of God, but he was the son of one of the celestial sons, Gabriel. And in that same cave was a piece of glass, and I think a doll too that was like a gift to him. And that the traitor to Jesus was actually not a traitor, it was someone else with a similar name. So it was very, very interesting book. And the other thing I was going to ask you, did you look into the Urantia? Did you read the Urantia?
I have examined it, but I've not found as far as prophetic truth within it, and so I've not dedicated to a lot of time to studying it.
Okay, one more question. The Law of One. Have you heard about that?
No.
I've heard of the Law of One, and also I've got the Urantia reader actually on my iPad. I've checked it out before. Someone had sent it to me to check out.
It's a third about Jesus's life, and it's a third about the earth, and a third about something else, heaven, I think, something. But very interesting.
Very cool.
Thick. It's really thick.
Yeah, well, thanks for, I'll definitely check that out. You've piqued my interest for sure, especially with it being in Aramaic.
I sent you a link to an article about it, Zen, so that you can check that in the chat after we're done.
Very good.
I appreciate that.
All right, excellent. Brother. Well, Aaron, thanks for calling in, my friend.
Thank you.
Yep, we'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, coming up next is caller number 4741. That's the last 4 digits of your phone number. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Red. Hey, how you doing, man?
Good. How about yourself? Can we get your name?
This is hater-proof, Red.
Hater-proof.
I'm around and about. You know me, dude.
Yeah,
anyway,
sure.
This is very, very interesting. You know what? One of the things that I think I personally internalize with religion, or the belief or ideology of religion, no excuse to kill one another on a global scale, by the way, is to look at like the personal struggle that I have, like as an individual, with like, the difference between right and wrong and what I choose every day, to choose, one day at a time to tell the truth, is, what's really, I think, subjectively going to bring the love for all of us, instead of them using it as a covenant means to, like, let's say, tax us or steal our children, or, change political systems and run governments and banking systems globally, for instance. So I think what it really boils down to is, like, when we look at free will, we have a choice as an individual to do either right or wrong. And sometimes wrong, right, isn't really easy at first, because there's so much temptation, as the Bible calls it, right, in front of our face, and everybody's involved in it, like the rackets that are being run in our country at the highest echelons of our government currently. And so they feel as if they have no choice because they feel that they have no hope.
Right.
They have nobody there for them. They're sitting alone in jail. They feel that they're at their worst when they're trying to be their best. And so I guess the thing is that I just wanted to say for all those people out there that have felt that, we understand. And that's why we're here and why, the Watchers watch the Watchers, because that's the way that we not only do our democratic free process here in our country, but, we believe in the truth, the rule of law, the U.S. Constitution as the highest law of the land. And, we've had people die over it in many, many years because, certain inalienable rights for us as individuals, like the right to not be enslaved or the right not to be judged for our ideologies, whatever they are, even if somebody else knows that they're wrong. There's a really good saying, Red, and I'm going to let you go. You can lead a horse to the lake of knowledge, but you're not going to force them to drink.
Yep.
True.
So anyway, on that note, my man, you guys take care, and thank you for your show and everything that you're doing, Red.
I appreciate it.
Really, it's good that you're a patriot, and there's good that we have other patriots in this room, and it's good that the country is waking up, and I'm really, 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 really happy with you guys. So
absolutely,
keep up the good work.
Well, glad to be here with you, Haterproof.
All right. Yep. Thank you, man.
Right,
Bye.
buddy. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
I like
All right.
the name.
Yeah. Coming up next is Barry. Barry, you're on the air with Zen Garcia. Are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Go ahead.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. I wanted to ask Zen if he'd ever heard of Jonathan Kleck. He's on YouTube, and he's been teaching this for like 17 years about Lucifer seducing Eve and the whole twin system.
Yeah, I have heard of Jonathan. He and I are really good friends, and a very long time ago, he joined me on my broadcast, and this was before he and John the Baptist had their own shows. But yeah, both of those guys were confirming witness for me, and we were for each other with regard to this particular truth and this particular revelation. And so yeah, Johnny and I are very, very much familiar with each other's work, and we've done numerous shows together. You can go to my Endeavor Freedom or Zen Garcia channels, just search Jonathan Kleck, and you'll find the many, many, many shows that we've done together.
Okay, so do you have an email system that you send out teachings if you sign up?
We do a newsletter. It's through sacredwordpublishing.com.
Okay.
And all of my books and all of my information is found there. I've published numerous books on this particular topic. As I made mention earlier, I do recommend The Great Contest 1, The War in Heaven, and The Great Contest 2, The Enmity Between the Seed Lines, for those that are wanting to understand the bigger picture of, even what we're contending with regard to the New World Order elites and how they're all from the same bloodline.
Right. Okay. I had signed up for that. I wasn't sure. That's why your name looked familiar to me. I'm so glad I caught this tonight because I'd like to learn more. Do you subscribe to what he talks about with in Genesis? I think it's 1 verse 2 about Elohim made the first man and woman, and we're taught that it's God the Father, the Lord Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, where it says, let us make them in our image and then go and procreate. But it's actually Elohim, which is God's judges and magistrates.
We have a slight difference of opinion on that with regard to, it is my belief that Satan does not have the power to create or to manifest from nothingness or to imbue life, and that he can only counterfeit or manipulate or alter from what already is. And so my interpretation of that is that in Genesis 1:26 through 28, that Elohim is speaking of the Holy Trinity, that they established the heavens and the earth, but certainly that just as it says in the Sumerian Chronicles, that the fallen angels, once they were cast out of the heavens and were found here on the earth, that they then began to try to enslave even the pre-Adamites and to make them into domestic workers, what they describe as the primitive worker, the Lulu. And that this is the reason, in my opinion, that the Most High created Adam in his own image and established modern humanity, and that it would be through us that judgment would come upon the fallen angels for their interdiction into the affairs of humanity, and that it would be through Adam's bloodline that Yeshua, as the Son of God, would be born, and that it would be him that, redeems us, rectifies the fall, and also brought judgment against the fallen ones for not only murdering him and crucifying him, but also they recognized, even the demons, whereas much of humanity did not. They said, "Have you come to torment us before the time?" And so they recognized him as the Son of God, and whereas much of the world did not. And so that's the differences that we have with regard to Genesis 1. Again, I don't believe that Satan has the power to create, and certainly didn't establish this world, and that he teaches that Satan was the one that created this world, and specifically that created women, and um, the separation of male and female.
Okay, thank you very much. I
You're very
appreciate it.
welcome. Yes, God
God
bless you.
bless.
Thank you for your call, Barry. God bless.
Yep.
Yeah, bye-bye. Zen, one thing that I had wanted to ask was, are you familiar with the work of Zecharia Sitchin, and do you give any credence to it at all? I know that there's a lot of controversy surrounding it because apparently his translations of the tablets that he was working off of was perhaps creative. Maybe that's a good way to say it, or maybe another way to say it is it was a whole cloth fiction. But I just wondered if any of the information that he had put out, if you thought there was anything to it at all.
Yeah, I absolutely am familiar. I've read all of his books, and as I said, I was involved in the New Age before being brought full circle back to studying and examining the biblical narrative and all the extra biblical texts, and so I have an understanding of how these things come together. But yes, the Sumerian mythology, it is somewhat based in truth, and the reason I can say this is because it does describe them as when they were cast out of the heavens, and when they came here to the earth, they tried to create a slave race of what was the the hominids that were then here on the earth. And we see in the word in Genesis 1:26 through 28 that God, again, the Holy Trinity, that they created this hominid because the earth had been destroyed and they were recreating it. And they told these particular beings, they created male and female in couples and in multiple races, and they were told to be fruitful, multiply, and to spread upon the earth. Whereas Adam was not created here on the earth, but was created in paradise. And it was from there that Adam was tempted. Even in the Sumerian mythology, the distinction between these two separate creation is spoken of. One is called the primitive worker, which the hominids prior to Adam could not speak in the manner that we do now. They did not domesticate animals and they did not farm, but they were able to perform menial tasks. And they were servants to the so-called demigods, the gods and goddesses, the pantheon of the fallen angels, the feathered serpents that we see, again, depicted, the seraphim angels, the Anunnaki, those who from heaven came. But then God established us, modern creation, modern Adam and Eve, in his image. And so then when Satan tempted Adam and Eve to fall, to eat from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that's what again brought forth the two races, as far as this seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. And them being cast out of paradise, we found ourselves here on the earth with the primitive, the pre-Adamites, as well as the fallen angels who were already cast out. And we see in the archaeological record that we see in the megalithic structures, and some of these structures dating back to even before what was the flood of the ice age and the meltdown of the ice during what, some say goes 15,000 years back, whatever, however it was. There were certainly, the fallen ones were creating cities and building these megalithic sites at a time when the water levels were different here upon the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And that was before the 6,000 years of the last, the modern history of, when we were here and have been here. And so if you understand that the fallen angels were cast out on the second day, they were here on the earth, they were involved with the pre-Adamites before our coming and before we were cast down and banished here to this earth, then you can make sense of what we see as the megalithic sites, how they were all connected to each other, how they were all built in similar pyramidal structure, how they were aligned to stars and constellations at a time when we had no such knowledge and no capacity to do so. And also that the involvement of the giants in the building of these megalithic sites, that this is something that is excluded from how they were able to achieve and how they had the technological capacity to accomplish such things, whereas we cannot even replicate those kind of things now, uh,
Absolutely.
with modern technology. And so I write about all of this in great detail, the antediluvian age, the prior times. You can find it in my books on the sons of God, paradise, the firmament, vaulted dome of the earth, and also in the great contest, one war in heaven.
All right, excellent. Phenomenon, did you change your name, or did we lose the other caller? Phenomenon?
I changed my name.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure I was going to the correct caller next. Phenomenon, how are you, sir? You're on the air with Zen.
Okay. Oh my God, my voice is so shot out. I'm sorry.
No problem.
I've got like 1,000 questions because this is my area of study, and you're bringing up stuff I've never even heard of in some cases. But I think I got a pretty good question here. In the book of Job, when Lucifer goes up there and hangs out with God and asks, "Hey, what do you think about this?" and God's like, "Well, you can do this." And I do have one quick comment to make. For all those people that are like, demons are aliens and extraterrestrial. By definition, angels are extraterrestrial. They're not of this earth. So just stop it. Is what I'd like to say. But I'm curious about what you think about the story of Job.
Yeah, the story of Job is a very interesting one in that it does give us insight into the sons of God and also how Satan was part of the Mount of the Congregation. And that he speaks about when God asks him, "Where have you been?" He says that he's been walking to and fro and up and down within the earth. And in my opinion, we see, and I explain this in great detail in my 19th book, Paradise Sides of the North and the Mount of the Congregation, that we see, whereas he wanted to exalt himself and to establish his throne above the Mount of the Congregation and the sides of the north, God cast him down to the bottomless pit. And there is, according to biblical cosmology, what is called the Rupus Negra. It's this black lodestone magnetic mountain, which is the tallest mountain in the world, and it sits at the center of the Earth plane at the North Pole. And that is also where the location of Jacob's ladder is, that there is a portal leading up into heaven and the throne room of God, as well as a hollow earth entrance into the interior of the earth. And that it is within the interior of the earth that the devil's domain, Tartarus, Sheol, Gehenna, they are found there also. And that this, what's called the abysmal chasm, there's this whirlpool that surrounds this Rupus Negra, this black lodestone magnetic mountain, that every 6 hours sucks in the oceans of the world, and then it expels them in geyser. And that this is what really creates the phenomena of the tidal rhythms and high and low tide. And so this is also spoken about by the ancient historians and explorers in the book, a 14th century book called the Inventio Fortunata, and also John D received a letter from Gerardus Mercator, who created the North Polar Projection Map. And in the most northern latitude, he speaks about the existence of this mountain as well as this whirlpool. He calls it an indrawing sea. We see in the Greek mythology, it speaks about the sea monster called Sharbertus. And this sea monster is spoken of as being a whirlpool. And so in the ventures of Odysseus, and in the Iliad and Virgil in Aeneid, as well as Jason and the Argonauts, if you read those stories, you'll see that they also encountered this particular phenomena as well as this lodestone mountain. And so I talk about its connections to the Bible and how it describes in both the book of Enoch, chapter 18, as well as the book of Job, chapter 26, this particular area, which is again called the bottomless pit. And also, there's an opening where Polaris is, the one fixed star of the celestial night, that is where the Most High has established his heavenly temple, and the throne room of the Most High God is situated there above Polaris, and that all of the stars rotate around Polaris, and it shows the center of what is the vaulted dome of the earth.
Fascinating. Phenomenon, thank you for your call, buddy. And coming up next is Karma Michelle. Karma, how are you? Karma, we've got a
great. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. How you doing?
Okay. I'm doing great. Thank you, Redpill. I have a question for Zen, but first I just want to tell you I do really love your show so much.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, Zen, I was just wondering if you think, because there's gospels that have been hidden from us, do you think there's any that could possibly be forgeries? Because there's another YouTuber named Kamarosan that makes a pretty solid case for the book of Revelation being possibly forged.
I do believe that there are some books that are forgeries, and that you have to be careful in study and examine everything. But I also believe that there are many texts which are not included in the Bible, which are absolutely inspired. And even the apocryphal texts, which, were taken out by the printers who simply wanted to reduce the size of the Bible so that they could replicate it in put it into a book form, which was not too expensive. And so they removed the 13 books of the Apocrypha and what's called the Shepherd of Hermas. And these books are inspired. And it's my opinion that one has to study and allow the Holy Spirit to lead one in discernment as to whether they are prophetic or not. And I do believe that historically, the powers that be have done more to try to hide truth from us than they have in trying to make it available to us. And so I do believe that there are a lot of manuscripts. And even with the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi codices, it's my opinion that God preserved them, for the time that we are living in now. And that he made the promise in Joel and also Acts that at the end of days, he would pour out his spirit upon all flesh. And I do believe that we are living in those times now.
That's beautiful, Zen. And what do you think of the book of Revelation specifically?
I do absolutely believe it to be prophetic. And the reason I say so is because we have put together a book called The Great Commission 3, which has all of the end time apocalypses. And there are literally dozens of manuscripts in this particular book which fall in line and confirm the timeline that is revealed in Revelation, and also specifically speaks about how Enoch and Elijah will be the two witnesses of Revelation 11, that because they were translated and they never had succumbed to death, God was preserving them, that they will come at the end of time, and that they will condemn the Antichrist, and that he will kill them in the streets of Jerusalem. They will lie dead for 3.5 days before being resurrected. And there are numerous, for instance, there's a book called and people can look this up right now. It's called The Revelation of Saint John the Theologian, which is not written in parable form, but is written, you know, easy to understand. It's very descriptive. One does not have to metaphorically try to break it down or interpret it in any way. It tells you exactly what's going to happen at the end of days, and it falls in line with what is revealed in Revelation.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Zen. You've given me lots to dig on.
You're very welcome.
Excellent. Thanks for your call, Karma. All right. And coming up next, caller, you're the only one on the screen with the last 44458. You're on the air.
Hi, my name is Cynthia, and I'm from Atlanta. And I wanted to ask Zen about the Four Horsemen.
Yes, the Four Horsemen is part of the unveiling of the end of days. And hello, that you're here in Atlanta. Just so you know, we do have every once in a while these meetups where I gather together with our listeners and people that want to join us and share fellowship, break bread with us. I'm in the Athens, Georgia area, and if you ever would like to join us and meet up, please just join the newsletter at sacredwordpublishing.com to find out more information. But with regard to the Four Horsemen, that is also a theme that you see played out within scriptures about the end times. And specifically, the apostles asked Christ, what would be the signs of your return and of the end of the age? And we see that in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, that we see the apostles, they write down in narrative what Christ revealed to them. And specifically, in my opinion, he says, know ye the parable of the fig tree. And that particular parable, in my opinion, is connected to what we see as the restoration of Israel as a nation, which occurred in 1948. And we see confirmation of this in a book called The Apocalypse of Peter, which we know Peter was one of the foremost apostles, but yet this particular narrative is left out of the King James Version of the Bible. And Peter asks Christ specifically what the parable of the fig tree means. And he tells him that it is connected to the house of Israel. And that when we see the house of Israel gathered together again, that this would be a sign for those that were then alive that we are in the last generation. And so, in my opinion, according to the text and what is revealed, the Four Horsemen are even now upon the scene, and that we are awaiting the coming of the Antichrist, the establishment of the beast kingdom, but that certainly the blooming of the fig tree, which was again the nation of Israel coming into being, which has never happened before to another nation, that this was a sign to us of the blooming of the fig tree, and that we are that generation which will see the fulfillment of all things. But again, specifically with regard to the end time apocalypses, if you are interested and want to know more about the prophecy of the end of days and the last times, please do get the Great Commission 3. There are so many texts which are specific to the fig tree generation, that if you read and you study that particular text, you'll know more about the end times than 99% of the pastors and preachers that are in mainstream churches that are teaching about the end of days.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I'm glad you're here in Georgia. Thank you. And I will definitely be looking you up.
You're very welcome. Be blessed in your study.
Thank you for your call, Cynthia.
Thank you.
And before we get to Nathan, I've got to just do a couple of quick super chats. Candy De Leon said, what is Zen's take on Mark Taylor and his warnings about the big mega churches?
I don't know who Mark Taylor is.
Okay. Mark Taylor, he's colloquially known as the Trump prophet. He's a good guy. He's been on the show before. Ben Schmogel says, I know about the Law of One. Corey Good and David Wilcock push that. AZ Finn says, Zen, the Tower of Babel, did they try to break through the firmament? Your thoughts?
They absolutely did. And you can find confirmation of this in the Chronicles of Jeremiah. And also the writings of Abraham, and it is specific to that Nimrod was going to try to he was going to try to make appear that he had killed God, that when they arrived towards the firmament, he was going to shoot arrows and have them bloodied before ever shooting them, and then these arrows coming down with the blood on them, he was going to declare that he had murdered God, and that he was then to rule over the world in what was one of the first attempts at establishing a new world order. And we see that how God feels about a one world government, a one world order under one person dominated like that. He destroyed the Tower of Babel and divided all of the races and gave them different tongues and separated the tribes and the people. So we know that God does not like the New World Order.
Excellent. I concur. All right, moving on to Nathan. Nathan, you can go ahead and unmute, buddy. And what is your question for Zen?
Hi, Zen. Nathan Thompson here. I run the official Flat Earth.
Brother. Love you, man.
I love you too, bro. The Bible says that God's qualities are clearly seen through creation. I was just wondering, what are your opinions on creation? Is it a heliocentric model or a geocentric model, and why is that important?
We absolutely know without a doubt it is geocentric, and that the reason it is important is because the heliocentric model has been established in order to bring forth the reign of the Antichrist, and that the ancient aliens are our creators, and that already we see being pushed that they are from some galaxy far, far away, and that long ago they came here and established humanity in their image, which we all know to be a lie. And so the whole theme of the heliocentric Copernican model has led astray more people into buying into scientism. And that's the reason why in this generation you see so many of the children that are hopeless, lost, and wayward, is because they doubt the authenticity of the word of God, and that there is intelligent design behind the creation, and that we were that we're important, and that the earth is important, and that there's a greater purpose to all things. And so understanding that the biblical cosmology is truly encoded into the word of God and describes things as they are, because anybody anywhere in the world can confirm that there is no curvature. You can go do a simple laser test and without a doubt affirm that there is no curvature. And so no matter what you think about the shape of the earth, the whole ideology that the earth is round or spherical in shape is bogus. And I think that even the Sumerian mythologies, because it is based on this heliocentric model, it declares that the ancient aliens established bases on the moon and Mars, which is impossible because they're just luminaries. They're not Earth-like in any manner. That shows you how far the deception goes back. 6,000 years already in the Sumerian mythos, they were trying to establish a basis, a foundation for what is now the whole push of that the ancient aliens, these extraterrestrials being from some faraway galaxy, that they were the ones that created humanity. And so many are, buying into that lie. And so that's why it's important to understand the truth of the word.
That Zen, you give some of the most detailed answers on the Bible. I'm such a big fan of you. And just one thing to mention, you didn't talk about the Earth's rotation, and God says the Earth is on pillars and will never move.
Right.
So what do you say to the people out there that think the Earth spins?
For anybody that believes that the Earth is moving 1,037 miles an hour, which is faster than a bullet shot from a gun or the speed of sound, I mean, if we were moving that fast, life could not exist on the surface of the Earth. And it's clearly seen according to the stars. Again, I was speaking about how Polaris is directly above the North Pole. If the Earth were moving 66,600 miles an hour around the sun, and the sun moving around the center of the Milky Way, and the Milky Way moving around some galactic center, there's no way that the stars could remain fixed in the manner that they have for thousands of years, and navigators using the North Star during night to determine direction. That would be impossible. And so it's very clear. I mean, I can go outside of the front of my house during the daytime, and some days my flag is not even waving. There's not even the slightest breeze. And for somebody to tell me that we're moving eastward at 1,037 miles an hour is absolutely ludicrous. And so, yes, the Bible declares that the earth is fixed, stationary, and unmoving. In the book of the Courses of the Heavenly Luminaries, which I decrypted, to show that, Enoch describes that the luminaries are moving. In 14 chapters, he attributes the motions of the sun, the moon, the stars, the wandering stars. There's not one verse or passage about the earth moving. And it's because, again, it is fixed, stationary, and unmoving.
Amen. What a beautiful answer. Thank you for having me on today, RedPill78. Ever since you had David Wise, I've been a fan of your channel. So
excellent. Thanks for your call, Nathan. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon, buddy. All right, we've got one more caller on the line, and that would be caller with the phone number ending 3872. You are the final caller of the evening. What is your question for Zen?
Hi, thanks, guys. I would just like to ask that we do a group prayer and pray for everyone that's hurting and in pain in this world, and to open their eyes and to see the truth.
Absolutely. I can close us in prayer, but before I do so, I want to just share one last thing. And I had made mention of the apocalyptic texts that are part of the Great Commission 3. I just want to share the individual manuscripts which make up this compilation to give people a better understanding of what I'm talking about. In this particular book, you have the Apocalypse of Abraham, the Apocalypse of Moses, the 14th vision of Daniel, the Apocalypse of Elijah, the Hebrew Apocalypse of Elijah, the 4th book of Ezra, the Apocalypse of Sirach, the Sibling Oracles, Book 2, the Apocalypse of Zephaniah, the Apocalypse of Baruch, the Apocalypse of Thomas, the Apocalypse of Peter, the 1st and 2nd Apocalypse of James, the Apocalypse of Paul, the Revelation of St. John the Theologian, the 10 signs of the end of the age, the Apocalypse of Samuel, and the Apocalypse of Zerubbabel, and finally, the vision of Adamant. And as I said, all of these books are specific to the end times and to our being the fig tree generation. And whenever you would like me to, brother, I can close this in prayer.
Okay, just need to do the last two super chats, and we'll go ahead and do that. Storm Girl says, "Hi Zen, what do you think Trump is? A man named Kim Clement said Trump was an instrument of God. Sounds crazy, but things happening now seem miraculous." Lesson Scrop says, "Thank you for your work. Les Crane Op will email you at a later date. Keep it up." And Charles Pixley said, "I'm a firm believer that Father has the best sense of humor. The New World Order is descending, as are the angels. Its origin, source, and king is Father." And if you want to go ahead and just give us your thoughts on Donald Trump, and then we can go ahead and lead on prayer.
Yeah, personally, yeah, I do see that, Donald Trump was anointed for this particular time. However, he is also part of establishment. He's blood related to the Illuminati families. He is a cousin of Hillary Clinton. That is mainstream news. You can look it up for yourself. Anybody that gets in a position where they can be selected, because voting does not matter, the right and the left, it's a false paradigm. And so whoever comes to power is without a doubt just a puppet on the string. Just like, you have the dog and pony show, the Kentucky Derby, and the horses you can bet on who's going to win the race. But it's the owners that really benefit, and they're the ones from behind the scenes that really pull the strings on what's going on with regard to the race. And it's the same thing. Yeah, I know a lot of people are a fan of Donald Trump, but again, in my opinion, anybody that comes to power as presidential candidate, they are already part of establishment. You always see cousins, Al Gore, and George Bush, John Kerry, George Bush, both skull and bones, both cousins, ninth cousins, even John McCain and Obama. Obama is blood related to these particular individuals as well. And so, Hillary Clinton is a cousin of Donald Trump.
Well, man, that one's a tough one for me to swallow. But the great thing about America is that difference of opinion allows us to be free.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, go ahead and lead us out, Zen. Thank you for your call, caller. I do appreciate it. And we're going to go ahead and close out the show right now with Zen leading us in prayer.
Yes. Father God, we just humble ourselves before you in thanksgiving again for all chance and opportunity, the blessings of this day, the fact that we could come together in the peace and comfort of this time, the blessings of this age, and to join our families in bounty and to be grateful to you for all that you do for us. But I do pray for those that are less fortunate, those that are suffering, those that are needing your aid and hurting and wanting your direction, Lord. Specifically, the orphan and the widow, the veterans with post traumatic stress, that the homeless, the people with disabilities, animals in need, all those that are struggling. I pray that you provide for them and give them a place of nourishment and plenty and lead them into a place where they can seek you out in truth and in revelation and in relationship. And I just give thanks, Lord, that I have the opportunity to share the revelations that you have led me to in discernment with all those that are here that are part of the supporting and listening audience of this good brother who's doing incredible work on your behalf. I just pray that you lead and guide all of us in discernment and that you help us to keep an open mind so that we can be receptive to those things which may go contrary to our indoctrination, because there's so much that we need to know and need to understand, and the only way that we can receive those revelations is by being open-minded to new possibility. And for that, Lord, I just give thanks to you for everything and just ask you to continue watch over us, keep us safe, bless this country, bless our nation, bless our world, and help us to fight against the seed of Cain and those that are ruling from the darkness. In your name, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. All right. Well, Zen, thank you so much for being here tonight. I really do appreciate it. I hope that everybody that was here listening got something out of it. It looked like we had a really civil conversation going on in the chat. I'd like to remind everyone that if you want to find more information out about Zen and his work, you can go to his website, which is sacredwordpublishing.com. The link to that is in the description of this video, as well as the link to his 2 YouTube channels. As always, this has been RedPill78. I am the corruption detector, and this was your Red Pill News for Friday Night Live Stream. Good luck, everyone, and God bless.
Be blessed all. Good night.